Accelerated Mastery. How to learn anything faster based on science. Limited edition of Mind Bloom audiobooks. Introduction. In a world that moves at breakneck speed, our ability to learn swiftly is becoming the ultimate competitive edge. While your parents or grandparents may have believed that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, modern scientific research proves otherwise. Our brains, no matter our age, have an astonishing capacity to adapt, rewire, and absorb new information if we understand how to unlock that potential. This book is your guide to doing exactly that. Whether you want to learn a new language, play the guitar, code software, or master public speaking, there are universal principles that can help you get there faster. Instead of letting the learning process drag on for months or years, you'll discover here that you can compress time frames and shorten the path to competence. You'll read about real people who have done so, both famous figures and everyday individuals who, through perseverance and the right methods, transformed their brains into powerful engines of knowledge acquisition. My aim is not just to give you a bunch of random tips, but to offer you a science-backed, step-by-step approach that you can apply to almost any skill. And it goes beyond technique. What truly accelerates learning is the synergy of mindset, environment, emotion, physical health, and deliberate practice. Each chapter delves into one of these key pillars, weaving in compelling stories, practical suggestions, and the latest discoveries from the fields of neuroscience and psychology. By the end, you'll recognize that learning isn't something that stops once you receive a certificate or earn a degree. It's an ever-evolving journey, one you can navigate with greater ease and enjoyment once you know the rules. So let's begin this expedition together, starting with one of the most influential factors in learning anything faster: the power of our mindset. Chapter 1. The Growth Mindset Revolution. For centuries, people believed that intelligence was primarily genetic, that some folks were simply born gifted, while others were doomed to struggle. If you were a natural at math, fantastic. If you weren't, well, better luck in another subject. It sounded neat and tidy, but recent research has cracked that old myth wide open. Psychologist Carol Dweck's influential work on growth mindset demonstrated that believing in your own potential to improve can drastically accelerate how quickly you learn. A growth mindset is the idea that intelligence and skill aren't static. They can evolve through effort, good strategies, and perseverance. Compare that to a fixed mindset, which says you've either got it or you don't. The result is that people with a fixed mindset often run from challenges, feeling threatened by the possibility of failure. Their sense of identity is so tied to being naturally smart or talented that any setback feels crushing. On the other hand, those who adopt a growth mindset see mistakes as stepping stones, valuable clues on the path to mastery. Neuroscientists support these claims with evidence of neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to form and reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning or after an injury. This means your brain is like a dynamic landscape that you can shape with directed attention and consistent practice. When you pick up a new instrument, your motor cortex and auditory cortex create new pathways. When you practice a new language, the regions associated with speech and comprehension expand to accommodate your growing skill set. Let's look at a real-world example. Elon Musk, founder of SpaceX, was once asked how he managed to learn enough about rocket science to build a company that lands rockets upright on floating platforms. His reply? He reads a lot of books and asks many smart people many questions. That might sound simple, but it's a prime example of a growth mindset in action. Never assuming one's own limitations, always believing that with curiosity and effort, you can accumulate the knowledge needed to excel. How you can apply it? Challenge yourself to see every learning obstacle as part of the process. If you're struggling with a new coding language, remind yourself that each error message is a breadcrumb leading you toward deeper understanding. Adopt the mantra that every expert was once a beginner, and suddenly your missteps will feel more like milestones than embarrassments. This mental shift lays the foundation for every other technique in this book, making it easier to sustain effort and remain open to feedback. Chapter 2. Memory. How to make knowledge stick. Memory is the beating heart of learning. You can watch all the tutorials and read all the textbooks you want, but if the information doesn't stick, it's like pouring water into a sieve. Scientists have dedicated extensive effort to understanding how memory works, and they've revealed techniques that can transform you from a forgetful rookie into a retention machine. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is a fundamental discovery in this area. Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist in the late 19th century, found that newly learned information fades rapidly, often within hours or days. However, he also noticed that reviewing material at specific intervals drastically reduces this loss, a principle known as spaced repetition. Imagine you're studying Portuguese vocabulary. If you revisit the words the next day, then 3 days later, then a week later, you're actively reinforcing those neural connections. It's the equivalent of weightlifting for your brain. You don't just lift once and hope for gains. You lift repeatedly with rest in between to build enduring muscle. This principle works beautifully in real-life cases. Language learners, med students, and tech professionals regularly use spaced repetition to churn through massive amounts of information. Online tools like Anki or flashcard apps that schedule reviews for you are particularly effective. But you don't need fancy software if it doesn't suit you. A simple calendar or notebook where you track when you last reviewed a concept can work wonders, too. Another powerful tactic is active recall. Instead of just passively reading through notes, test yourself by trying to recall the information from memory. For instance, if you're reading about Napoleon's military campaigns, close your book periodically and summarize what you remember. This forces your brain to reach back into its neural vault, strengthening your ability to retrieve those facts on demand. Research shows that active recall can outperform conventional rereading because it transforms learning from a passive to an active experience. When combined, spaced repetition plus active recall, these methods act like two wings of an airplane, lifting your memory to new heights. If you adopt these techniques consistently, you'll find that you don't have to cram as often, nor will you feel like you're relearning everything from scratch after a month's hiatus. Instead, knowledge will embed itself, becoming part of your mental toolbox you can access whenever you need it. Chapter 3. Deliberate Practice. Going deep, not wide. There's a popular myth that if you just put in 10,000 hours at something, you'll become an expert. The real story is a bit more nuanced. The psychologist Anders Ericsson, often associated with that 10,000-hour rule, discovered that it's deliberate practice, not simply any practice, that is the key to expertise. Deliberate practice involves pushing yourself slightly beyond your current limits with clear goals, immediate feedback, and intense focus. Take, for example, a violinist preparing for a major concert. Simply playing through the same pieces for hours might reinforce existing habits, both good and bad. If she wants to perfect her technique, she needs to hone in on difficult sections, isolate them, practice them slowly, and maybe even record herself to identify flaws. It's an uncomfortable process because it often highlights your weaknesses. But that's the whole point. By tackling what's challenging, you force your brain to strengthen and reorganize neural connections. Another high-profile illustration is how Michael Jordan trained. Known for relentless drills, Jordan didn't just practice shooting. He practiced shooting from specific spots on the court, under varying degrees of defensive pressure. With every miss, he'd adjust his form, posture, and mental approach, burning the correct motion into his muscle memory. It wasn't about the sheer volume of shots, it was about the quality of those attempts and the degree of intention behind them. Whether you're learning to program, speak Spanish, or bake French pastries, focus on the specific elements that challenge you. Seek targeted feedback, not just praise. Ask a friend to taste test your pastry crust and be brutally honest. Review your code with a mentor who points out structural flaws. Watch and critique recordings of your own public speeches. It's humbling, sure, but each round of feedback propels you forward. Deliberate practice thus becomes your secret accelerator, saving you from the plateau that comes with complacent repetition. Chapter 4. The Emotional Spark of Learning. Emotions often get sidelined in discussions of learning, but they're just as critical as the raw facts and strategies. When your curiosity or excitement is piqued, your brain literally shifts into a higher gear, releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine that reinforce neural pathways. It's like laying down a stickier mental road, one that new insights can latch onto more easily. We see an extreme version of this with immersion programs for language learning. Instead of passively studying flashcards, participants are tossed into a country where they must navigate daily life in a foreign tongue. The emotional stakes are high. Everything from ordering coffee to asking for directions sparks a kind of arousal that cements each new word or phrase in the memory. Students often gain fluent conversation skills in mere months, surpassing peers who've spent years reading textbooks. That intense emotional engagement is a catalyst. Of course, not everyone can pack up and move to Spain for 3 months, but you can still harness emotion wherever you are. Suppose you want to learn about astronomy but find yourself dozing off while reading dense scientific papers. Try taking a walk on a clear night and gazing at the stars. Connect the facts you read with the awe-inspiring reality above you. Watch documentaries that make your heart pound with wonder. Share your fascination with friends or family. Describe the immensity of Jupiter's storms or the cosmic ballet of galaxies colliding over eons. The more you stir your emotions, the more your mind latches onto what you're learning. It also helps to link what you're learning to your personal identity or future goals. If you're picking up financial literacy skills, imagine the freedom and security you'll feel when you're no longer stressed about bills or debt. Envision the life you'll create once you can strategically invest or grow a business. Those emotional cues keep your motivation buoyant, helping you persist through the inevitable obstacles. Look at it this way: your emotions can act as either rocket fuel or as dead weight. Choose to leverage them, and you'll find that your learning ignites like never before. Chapter 5: Focus, Flow, and the Battle Against Distractions. Modern life is loud. Between smartphone pings, social media updates, and the daily hustle of obligations, achieving deep focus can feel like a monumental task. Yet, focus is the crucible in which accelerated learning takes place. When you're truly locked in on a single task, your brain forms connections more rapidly, integrates information more smoothly, and can often break barriers you didn't know were there. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi coined the term flow to describe the state of total immersion in an activity. Athletes call it being in the zone. Writers describe it as words pouring out of them without conscious effort. In flow, your sense of time warps. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes. Not surprisingly, this is also one of the states where learning can explode, because your brain is devoting all its processing power to the challenge at hand. The catch is that flow demands an environment that nurtures it. You have to minimize interruptions, turn off notifications, shut the door, or put on noise-canceling headphones. It also helps to have a specific challenge that's neither too easy nor impossibly hard. If it's too easy, your mind drifts. If it's too hard, your mind panics. The sweet spot is where you're stretched to your limits but still believe you can succeed with effort. A typical scenario: let's say you've got an hour to study a new programming framework. Instead of glancing at your phone whenever it buzzes, you silence it entirely. You shut down every unnecessary browser tab. You dive into a tutorial that's difficult enough to keep you engaged but not so advanced that it paralyzes you. You keep a notepad beside you to jot down urgent thoughts or tasks that pop into your mind, so you don't feel the need to handle them immediately. With these simple steps, you drastically improve your odds of entering a flow state, allowing you to learn at a blistering pace. While it might seem that we need massive willpower to do this daily, it can become second nature. As you experience the benefits, finishing tasks in less time, retaining information more thoroughly, you'll be more motivated to keep distractions at bay. The real trick is understanding that focus isn't some innate talent but a skill you can cultivate. And once you do, the pathway to faster learning becomes far clearer. Chapter 6: Health, Body, and Brain, the Forgotten Triad. Learning doesn't just happen in your head, your entire body plays a role. Research continues to show that factors like sleep, diet, and physical exercise have profound impacts on cognitive function. If you ignore these foundational elements, you risk leaving a significant portion of your learning potential on the table. Sleep is arguably the most underappreciated factor. During deep stages of sleep, your brain consolidates memories, effectively uploading the day's new information from short-term to long-term storage. Chronic sleep deprivation scrambles this process, causing you to forget more easily and struggle with complex problem-solving. Even the famed Thomas Edison, who glorified long work hours, took catnaps to refresh his mind. He may not have fully understood the neuroscience, but intuitively knew that rest was vital to spark those breakthrough ideas. Exercise, particularly aerobic exercise such as running, cycling, or swimming, can supercharge your learning. It boosts blood flow to the brain and stimulates the release of a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is like fertilizer for your neurons, encouraging them to grow and form stronger connections. Think about the last time you went for a brisk walk and suddenly found that your thoughts became clearer or you stumbled upon a fresh solution. That's the power of exercise at work. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs weave exercise breaks into their schedules not just for their bodies, but to keep their minds razor sharp. Then there's nutrition. Foods rich in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids, like berries, nuts, and fish, provide the brain with the building blocks for healthy cell function. Chronic junk food consumption, on the other hand, can lead to brain fog and sluggishness, making it difficult to sustain attention or recall information. While the occasional treat won't sabotage you, keep in mind that your dietary choices do ripple out into how effectively you can learn and perform. When you align your lifestyle, sufficient sleep, regular exercise, a balanced diet, you create fertile soil for learning to take root. Suddenly, memorizing that new piece of information or mastering that new technique becomes less of a grind and more of a natural progression. It's not a fancy trick, but it's essential. Think of it as the strong foundation of a house. Everything else you build stands on it. Chapter 7. Real-life examples of accelerated learners. People often dismiss extraordinary success stories as exceptions, figuring those individuals have innate genius or a level of privilege most don't have. But we can learn a great deal from ordinary people who've achieved mastery in a short period, thanks to applying the principles discussed so far. Take the case of a middle-aged accountant named Sandra who decided she wanted to pivot into web development. With zero coding background, she quit her job, signed up for an intensive coding bootcamp, and embraced a growth mindset. She practiced daily, using spaced repetition for programming concepts, seeking feedback from mentors, and physically blocking out distractions during deep study sessions. She even incorporated short jogs into her schedule to clear her mind when she felt mentally stuck. Within 5 months, much faster than many of her peers, she landed a junior developer role. As she put it, it was all about how I approached learning, not just the hours I put in. Another striking example is a high school student named Javier, who was determined to become fluent in Japanese. He couldn't afford an immersion trip to Tokyo, so he created a mini immersion at home. He switched his phone and laptop to the Japanese language setting, regularly Skyped with language exchange partners, and set aside half an hour daily for deliberate conversation practice, tackling the areas he found toughest. He used spaced repetition flashcards to remember kanji characters and made time to watch anime with Japanese subtitles for added context. In under a year, Javier was holding near-fluent conversations, an outcome that often takes students several years in traditional classes. Even large corporations apply these principles. Tech companies sometimes host hackathons, where employees lock in on a specific problem for a day or two. They isolate distractions, focus exclusively on the challenge, and often emerge with creative solutions that might have taken weeks under normal circumstances. It's a testament to how focus, feedback, and the right emotional spark, like the shared excitement of a team challenge, can fast-track learning and innovation. These stories remind us that accelerated learning isn't just for prodigies or celebrities. With a proper system of mindset, memory tactics, deliberate practice, emotional engagement, focus, and healthy lifestyle choices, you can create your own transformation story. Chapter 8. The Technology Advantage. Leveraging Digital Tools. We live in an era blessed, and sometimes cursed, with endless digital resources. Whether it's language learning apps, online courses, virtual reality training, or specialized forums, technology can shrink the gap between novice and expert, if you know how to use it wisely. One popular example is spaced repetition software, SRS. Apps like Anki adapt to your performance, spacing out review sessions based on which cards you find easy or difficult. Some platforms even integrate game-like elements, awarding points or badges that keep your motivation high. Similarly, online masterclasses connect you with global experts in fields like cooking, screenwriting, or astrophysics. You get to learn directly from a renowned instructor, an opportunity that was unthinkable for most people just 2 decades ago. Then there's the immersive potential of virtual or augmented reality. Medical students can now practice surgeries in a simulated operating room, receiving real-time feedback without risking a patient's well-being. Pilots can clock hundreds of hours in a flight simulator before ever setting foot in a cockpit, refining their instincts and decision-making processes in a relatively low-pressure environment. The result? By the time they're in a real-life scenario, many of the mental pathways are already in place, dramatically reducing the learning curve. But technology can be a double-edged sword. While it can accelerate your progress, it can also be a vortex of distractions. Hours that could be spent on deep practice might vanish in social media scrolling. If you're aiming for a flow state, One stray push notification can derail the intense concentration you've spent the last 20 minutes building. So the responsibility lies on you to harness these tools without letting them hijack your focus. You might set up focus time on your devices, blocking out certain apps or websites for specified periods. Some people choose to keep their phone in another room altogether while studying or practicing. As with any tool, the value of technology depends on the discipline and intention with which you use it. When managed correctly, it becomes a powerful ally on your quest to learn faster. Chapter 9: Building Your Personal Learning Playbook. Now that we've explored the fundamental elements, mindset, memory, practice, emotion, focus, health, and tech, it's time to synthesize them into a personal learning playbook that fits your life. This is where knowledge turns into action. Start by defining a clear, inspiring goal. Make it something that lights you up emotionally. I want to speak French fluently by next summer so I can travel to Paris and immerse myself in the culture. Or, I will master front-end web development so I can create a personal project that helps local businesses get online. Vague goals, like, I should learn coding one day, lack the energy needed to sustain momentum. Next, map out a time frame and daily or weekly benchmarks. Let's say you decide on 60 to 90 minutes of deep work each weekday, focusing solely on your new skill. Plan for active recall sessions, spaced repetition reviews, and deliberate practice routines that target your weaknesses. Layer in accountability. Maybe you share milestones with a friend or mentor who can check in on your progress. Pay attention to the environment. Rearrange your workspace so that it nudges you toward productive behavior. Make it easy to settle down with fewer disruptions. If necessary, find a library or cafe that energizes you. Arrange blocks of time when you switch your phone to airplane mode or use website blockers to keep you on track. This physical and digital environment is the scaffold around which your new knowledge will grow. Then there's the matter of tracking and reflection. Keep a journal, spreadsheet, or digital log of what you did, how it felt, and what you learned each session. Reviewing this log weekly lets you see patterns. Are you skipping practice on certain days? Are you lacking energy due to sleep issues? Did a particular method of practice yield better retention? These insights will guide adjustments to your plan. Finally, plan to celebrate small wins. Every time you master a tricky chord progression or achieve a milestone in a language app, treat yourself. These micro rewards act like psychological boosters, reminding you that progress is happening and that you're on the right track. Over time, you'll build a virtuous cycle of motivation and improvement, transforming short bursts of learning into a lifelong habit. Chapter 10: Staying the Course. Lifelong learning in a fast-changing world. We're living in an age where technology and information evolve almost daily. The most valuable workers in the next decade won't just be those who've already mastered a certain skill. They'll be those who can adapt by learning new skills on the fly. Whether it's artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or changing market dynamics, being a fast learner is your passport to resilience and success. However, even the most disciplined among us experience dips in motivation. You might hit a plateau where you feel stuck, or life events might derail your routine. That's normal. Real growth often comes from navigating these valleys. Revisit your goals and ask if they still excite you. If they don't, consider reframing them. Could you aim for a new application of your skill or find a more challenging target that rekindles your spark? Consider the power of community. Finding a group, online or offline, of people on a similar path can buoy you through tough times. You share tips, celebrate each other's wins, and provide constructive feedback. You realize you're not alone in the struggle, and that sense of camaraderie can pull you forward when your energy flags. Above all, remember that learning doesn't have a finish line. It's a journey that can keep you mentally flexible, culturally engaged, and forever curious. Your brain is an ecosystem, continually shaped by what you feed it and how you challenge it. Treat it well. Focus on improvement, not perfection. Embrace temporary failures as pieces of the bigger puzzle. When you look back after months or years of applying these principles, you'll see how far you've come, not just in skill level, but in character. The process of learning faster demands that you evolve into someone more resilient, more open-minded, and more adventurous. That's the real reward. It's not merely about checking off boxes on a skill list. It's about awakening your capacity to adapt, grow, and thrive no matter what the future holds. Conclusion: learning faster isn't a magic trick reserved for geniuses or those with unlimited resources. It's a practice rooted in scientific principles that any of us can adopt. First, we embrace the growth mindset, believing in our capacity to improve. Next, we master memory techniques like spaced repetition and active recall, layering in deliberate practice that zeroes in on our weak points. We harness emotion to amplify retention, while safeguarding our focus from the digital noise that surrounds us. We also recognize that our physical health underpins our cognitive performance, and we leverage the right technology tools without letting them derail our concentration. Finally, we wrap everything together in a personal learning plan that keeps us moving forward, even when motivation wanes. In a world of rapid technological shifts and constant demands on our time, the skill of accelerated learning is more than a nice-to-have, it's critical. The real magic lies in the process itself, in transforming everyday routines into catalysts for growth. If you commit to these principles, you'll discover that your mind is far more flexible and powerful than you ever imagined. Doors that once seemed locked will open, and you'll step confidently into new fields, new careers, or new creative pursuits. As you turn the final page of this book and step back into the busy stream of life, remember that your biggest breakthroughs might be just around the corner. Learning, after all, is the linchpin of progress. Arm yourself with the science-backed approaches you've discovered here, and trust in your ability to keep growing. You are not a fixed entity. You are an ever-evolving learner on a path that only ends when you decide to stop walking. Take these insights, test them, mold them to your life, and watch in awe as your learning capacity, and your world, expand beyond your wildest expectations.